It so happened that that day, or rather evening, was the last for Hikaru. The boy did not hear the car horn because there was no horn at all. The driver of the truck simply demolished the young man's body and drove on. And Hikaru, feeling the intense pain, felt his consciousness fading away. And the last thing he saw was that damn truck that destroyed all his hopes. Andrea. All people, when they die, cross the Sanzu River in white robes. The whole process happened for people at the same time, and a real crowd was created, even after death. Hikaru remembered the words of his senpai, who suggested that there was some kind of life after a person died. But what Hikaru saw now was clearly out of all conventional wisdom. Slowly advancing in the long line, Hikaru could not understand why everything was so complicated and why create such a tedious line in the first place. But reflecting on what was happening, the young boy realized everything and resigned himself to his stupid death. This situation even amused Hikaru a little, because he could never have thought before that he would die so young. Adhering to his life principle of staying away from everyone, Hikaru left the line and decided to walk a little. At this moment, the boy remembered that the atmosphere at home wasn't exactly good either. His parents were constantly fighting and few people paid attention to him. There was resentment and misunderstanding in the family. From heavy thoughts, Hikaru was distracted by someone's shouting from outside. After quenching his curiosity, Hikaru saw a group of guys beating some poor guy. As it happens, Hikaru had never fought before, but this time he decided that since he was already dead, he should try to do it. Hikaru kicked one of the guys with all his might and transferred energy to him for acceleration. From the surprise, the bald brute shrieked and flew aside. After recovering from the initial shock, the bald guy growled angrily, asking Hakira why he even did it. But instead of answering, Hikaru decided to finish what he had started and stamped his foot into the bald guy, causing him to lose contact with the world around him. The bald guy's two accomplices decided to get away and dragged the unconscious body of their buddy behind them. Hikaru helped the battered guy stand up, and the guy in turn thanked his savior and asked his name. Hikaru introduced himself and explained that he was 15 years old. The beaten boy was surprised that he had been rescued by a guy who was 3 years younger than him and was saddened by his weakness. The guy then offered to take Hikaru a strange pouch as a thank you that he had already seen from the other people. The rescued guy explained that Hikaru should have such a pouch too, just need to look for it. Hikaru was surprised at the strange gift, and the beaten guy stated that it was all he could do expressing his gratitude. At that moment, another non-familiar who had seen everything that had happened approached Hikaru and politely asked to hear him out. Hikaru decided that he must be a foreigner because he was blonde, which was not typical for his country, and asked him how he could help him. Hikaru also noticed the stranger's clothes, because he was not dressed in all white like the others. The blonde man explained that he unfortunately didn't have much time, and so he would try to be brief. The excited stranger stated that he wanted Hikaru to go to his homeworld and live in his place. The blonde then showed a dark stain on his clothes, which was the result of a huge loss of blood. Hikaru was horrified at the sight of the gruesome wound and asked what it was. The stranger sadly confessed his imminent death. Hikaru couldn't understand what was even going on and how this guy could still be alive yet ended up here. Hikaru didn't understand how he could even take the place of someone in another life. The blonde replied that he was from a completely different world. The wounded guy explained that he used a skill to move between worlds, and it allowed him to end up here. Hikaru exclaimed that he didn't understand anything he heard at all, and it was starting to annoy him. The blonde reminded that he had very little time, and it was not worth going into details. So Hikaru should just go to his homeworld and fulfill his important wish. And it will be great if it works out. The blonde man explained that if successful, Hikaru would be able to return to life and be reborn anew in the real world. This was something Hikaru didn't expect to hear, and it made him excited. Hikaru thought that it was very tempting if it was possible to be reborn. After all, he was already dead and could no longer be afraid of anything. The blonde man meanwhile talked about how Hikaru would be able to live his own life to the fullest if he fulfilled an important request. Hikaru decided that everything looked too smooth and asked what the price was. And since one must fulfill some wish for the sake of revival, one would like to find out what exactly one would have to do. but the blonde promised to explain everything when they were already at the place. The wounded stranger reminded of his limited time and asked him to believe him, because Hikaru really wasn't in any danger. After a short thought, Hikaru agreed to go to the stranger's world and listen to his important request. Hikaru himself was curious to know what other worlds were really like. The blonde man got excited and said that he would now use the skill of traveling between worlds. The scarred blonde then introduced himself and said the unusual name Roland Nuizera. A bright magic circle shone around the boys, and Roland declared that he would bestow his body upon Hikaru. After the bright light stopped blinding his eyes, Hikaru felt the warmth of his body. There was also sensitivity in his arms and legs. It was like waking up after a long sleep. After coming to his senses, Hikaru cautiously stood up and realized that he was in a room. A large mirror caught his attention, and Hikaru decided to take a look at himself. There was no limit to his surprise, as the reflection was indeed a real confirmation of rebirth. Before he could get away from the first surprise, Hikaru felt a sharp headache, and then various episodes from someone else's life began to appear in his mind. When the headache passed, Hikaru realized that he had received Roland's entire memory, and it was proving to be quite a painful process. As soon as Hikaru realized that he was now Roland and the injured blonde appeared, Hikaru immediately accused Roland of deception and demanded an explanation of what was really wrong with him. Possessing Roland's consciousness, Hikari asked why he now needed to kill some man, since that was what Roland wanted. Roland confessed that his desire really involved killing, and Hikaru must end the vile countermarks. This man is a key figure among the corrupt aristocracy. Roland explained that he tried to solve the Count's crimes, but Amorx ordered the murder of his parents and then ordered the murder of himself. Roland stated that he was still able to defeat the assassin using the soul-pulling stone in return for most of his soul, and in about an hour he would die permanently. Hikaru asked if he understood correctly that he needed to kill the Count before that happened. Roland warned that if he failed to do so in time, he would reject Hikaru's soul and no rebirth would occur. All of this seemed very suspicious to Hikaru, and he confessed that he did not like it all. But Roland instantly became angry and said that there was no other way, and leaving the cursed Count would be a mistake for the kingdom or even for all mankind. Hikaru realized that he would not be able to refuse, for if Roland rejected his soul, it would have nowhere to go and would simply disappear into oblivion. Realizing that there was really very little time left, Hikaru raised his knife and decided to act. Realizing that there was no other choice in the situation, Hikaru declared that he was willing to help Roland in exchange for his life. Hikaru asked if he understood correctly that since they were going to kill such a high-ranking aristocrat, they needed to prepare for the consequences. Roland agreed and said that he had a gift for Hikaru for that occasion. Roland explained that he had this gift from his childhood and asked Hikaru to concentrate as much as possible. It was all very strange and incomprehensible, but Hikaru still followed Roland's request. As soon as it was possible to concentrate, Hikaru felt a bright light. After that, some kind of window appeared, showing Hikaru's name and age. Roland explained that these were all possible characteristics, and a surprised Hikaru asked if it was all normal. Roland explained that he had too little strength left, and so he would try to tell him exactly what to do while he was still here. Roland reminded him that there were only 55 minutes left. Hikaru felt sad about the wasted 5 minutes and decided that he needed to get ready, because he had to be ready for anything. Touching the magic status window, Hikaru heard a question asking if he wanted to unlock the soul window, and it turned out it would cost 1 characteristic point. All of this was a mystery to Hikaru, and the guy decided to unlock the so-called soul window. After confirming it, various strange symbols appeared in the window. Gradually, Hikaru began to realize that it was a skill window, similar to those characterization systems he had seen in popular games. In those games, one had to spend skill points to gain certain skills, and thus could become stronger through such points. Hikaru noticed that he only had 14 available skill points left. Hikaru decided that the original number of characteristic points was the same as his age. The guy thought that since his task was to kill an important person, then he would need to approach him carefully. Hikaru began to scroll through the different skills that could be obtained, and it turned out that none of them increased dexterity, and so he would need to look for some other attack skills. Suddenly, the screen changed and Hikaru began to carefully look for anything useful. The whole mechanics of using the soul window reminded Hikaru of a normal tablet, and he quickly realized that there were only 7 screens. These windows showed a person's life abilities. It was unknown exactly what the other screens were doing, but Hikaru realized that it would take 6 points to find out. Roland at that moment reminded him of the 45 minutes remaining. Time was inexorably running out and Hikaru decided to unlock something. Different branches of development such as magic, strength, agility, flexibility, stealth, and speed appeared. Hikaru decided that magic was unlikely to be suitable for use in an unfamiliar body, and it was best to leave that for later. Strength was a useful skill, but melee combat was unlikely to be suitable in this situation. In the end, Hikaru realized that he needed stealth. The system voice offered to unlock a new skill for 1 available point. Hikaru realized that everything had to be paid for and noticed that some skills were completely unsubscribed and remained temporarily unavailable. The guy decided that the unavailable skills would apparently only unlock for points spent and decided to give it a try. In the end, unlocking unlocked 3 more skills. The life skill allowed further unlocking of life detection skills with a maximum of 5 units. Magic power allowed unlocking magic detection, and perception allowed unlocking detection through smell, sound, and sight. After unlocking, Hikaru only had 10 points left and now needed to allocate them wisely. Hikaru assumed the presence of serious guards on the way to his goal and decided to invest 1 point each in the skill of life and magic power, and perception to pump to the maximum. After maximizing the perception skill, another skill opened up and Hikaru became interested in the novelty. The skill obtained turned out to be the assassination skill, and Hikaru decided that it should be useful during the hunt for the Count. From the description, it was possible to find out that if at the time of the attack to remain unnoticed by the enemy, the attack is guaranteed to be detailed, and the maximum development of the skill was 3 units. Hikaru was convinced of the value of this ability. Since the remaining points were also 3, Hikaru decided that to breed to the maximum in killing. After all, in this situation, it would be the best choice. After all, it was obvious that in order to continue living in this world, one would still have to go for killing a stranger. Having finished improving the skill assassin, Hikaru noticed the appearance of the skill sniper, and the guy decided that this is exactly what he needed. But unfortunately, there were no more improvement points available, and Hikaru decided to try out his new abilities first. Roland reminded him that there were only 35 minutes left. The first thing Hikaru decided to try out was the stealth ability. After activating the stealth skill, Hikaru felt very strange. It felt unusual, as if his body had disappeared altogether, and there was an incredible lightness. Roland kept reminiscing about time, and Hikaru asked him not to rush him, because it was too annoying. Thanks to Roland's memories, Hikaru knew very well that the Count was in this city. Without further ado, Hikaru left the key with the receptionist and left the inn building. Soon he was at the right building where the Count was supposed to be. It was only 25 minutes away, but alas, the back door was closed and Hikaru decided to go through the front door. Once inside the room, Hikaru immediately ran into 2 guys who were cheerfully discussing their rich clients. But to Hikaru's surprise, they didn't notice him at all. As it turned out, the skill worked much better than Hikaru expected, and he was able to calmly walk past the 2 guys in the narrow hallway. Hikaru quickly went up to the right floor and passed the 2 guards in the same way. But as soon as the guards passed by, one of them showed marvels of observation and noticed wet footprints. The partner was not at all surprised, for it was raining outside. To the observant guard, he explained that no one had come in here in a long time, much less come out. But then the guards decided that still these footprints were left by people from the Alchemists' Guild who were training their daughter. Eventually, the guards calmed down and continued their patrols, chatting sweetly about the beautiful maidens they had seen at the local eatery. And Hikaru exhaled a sigh of relief, for he was already almost certain that he had been exposed. There was a free corridor ahead, and all that was left was to get to the target. Roland of course did not forget to stir Hikaru's already strained nerves and reminded him that there were only 15 minutes left. Carefully exploring each door, Hikaru found the only room that had a light on, and that was where the doomed Count was supposed to be. Hikaru decided to make sure if the person behind the door was indeed the one behind the door, and heard a familiar voice cursing some barren and emotionally outraged. Thanks to Roland's memories, Hikaru immediately recognized the voice, and there could be no doubt that it belonged to Count Amorx. Hikaru realized that now was the moment of truth. His emotions mixed with Roland's emotions. Doubt mixed with anger and a thirst for revenge. But no matter what, it became clear that if Hikaru opened the door, there would be no turning back, and it would be necessary to kill the man. The lust for life still prevailed, and Hikaru took the cold metal of the door handle with a trembling hand. But the knob greeted Hikaru unfriendly, and the boy pressed his hand against it. Thoughts were confused, and Hikaru began to convince himself that everything will be fine and need to make a decisive step. Wanted to live on, and only the death of the villain would give a chance. The unpleasant tremor in his hand continued to irritate, and Hikaru remembered how easily he died under the wheels of the damned truck. This unknown world turned out to be not so pleasant either, since in it people die in the blink of an eye. Hikaru realized the most important rule of this world and his life. You have to kill or die, and there is no third. The annoying Roland again reminded him of the time that only 10 minutes remained. Busy with important matters, Count Amorx heard the unpleasant creaking of the door and did not immediately take his eyes off the documents. The Count was sure that someone had entered the room, but to his surprise there was no one. Such a ridiculous situation left Amorx confused. The Count decided that apparently someone was outside the door and asked if there were any knights so. But there was no answer, and Amorx decided that his imagination had simply run wild. Count Amorx continued reading some letters and did not even feel the presence of the one who had decided to tear his life away. Unexpectedly, Hiraku said that the Count was wrong. This caused the aristocrat to be shocked, and he immediately asked Hiraku who he was in the first place. The situation became heated, and the guy decided that there was no turning back. Through Hiraku's mouth, Roland began to speak and let the Count know who he really was. Roland explained to Hiraku that he needed to finish off the Count with his own hands. Amorx heard all this and felt a wild fear. Roland declared through Hiraku's mouth that he had come to kill the Count. Roland explained to Hiraku that he did not want to be tormented by the thought that he had killed a man. Roland began to dominate Hiraku's body and move toward the terrified Count holding his dagger forward. All the anger and thirst for retribution made his hands hold the weapon tightly for one sure strike. Count Amorx rushed to the writing desk and decided that he could not bear the strain. Roland advised caution. But Roland's rage and Hiraku's thirst for life merged together, and all of it endowed the body with incredible determination. Hiraku shouted that he was prepared to do anything for his life and rapidly began to shorten the distance. The Count's age and slowness left no chance to dodge, and Hiraku felt the blade easily penetrate the victim's obese body. Hiraku suddenly felt confident and twisted the dagger with force. Count Amorx wheezed in pain and eventually fell to the floor. Hiraku was horrified at the sight of blood. The heavy odor with the tang of metal made him feel nauseous, and the assassin's hands trembled treacherously. Roland admitted that he could hardly believe that Hiraku could still do it. Hiraku recalled that this was what Roland had originally wanted. Roland explained that he himself thought it was best for Hiraku, so it was the right thing to do. Having come to terms with the murder, Hiraku stated that he and Roland now seemed to have become true accomplices. Roland was happy and thanked Hiraku for fulfilling his wish. Roland confessed that he had nothing to lose now. Neither money nor honor interested him anymore, and therefore his body now belonged to Hiraku. Roland was ready to leave this world completely and asked his accomplice to recall his name. Hiraku introduced himself and felt something magical enter his body already. Roland thanked his savior for his help and reminded him that his name and memories would now remain with Hiraku forever. Then, in a weakening voice, Roland promised to always pray for Hiraku. Fully giving his life energy to Hiraku, Roland promised his friend a bright and serene future. Gradually, Hiraku came to his senses, but suddenly an excited female voice sounded from behind. A stranger asked if it was Hiraku who had killed the Count. The young boy was numb with the realization that he had been caught in the act and did not know what to do. A beautiful blonde confidently entered the room and stared intently at the man who stood next to the dead body. The girl with the silver hair was incredibly beautiful, and it remained to be seen what she wanted. Without taking her eyes off Hiraku, the beautiful stranger broke the silence and said that the bell was ringing, which meant that the guards were on their way. Hiraku realized that before he died, the Count had still managed to ring the small bell that apparently signaled danger. The guy thought that it might be worth activating the stealth skill and just run away. But suddenly the girl informed him that there was a rope ladder on the balcony and Hiraku could use it. The girl's words surprised Hiraku, for the stranger was telling the truth and it was not clear why she was helping a person she was seeing for the first time. Hiraku hesitated, but the blonde woman shouted for him to save himself immediately and run to the balcony. The woman's shout gave the boy speed, and he tore toward the saving stairs. Hiraku quickly turned the ladder around and prepared to get out of the balcony. But at that moment, the guards rushed into the room, obeying the Count's bell, and were surprised to see Miss Louvière next to the dead body. One of the guards made sure that the Count was indeed dead and then rushed to the balcony. But in the end, the angry soldier saw only a rope ladder. The guards realized that the murderer might be downstairs on the first floor and quickly organized a search. Miss Louvière was almost oblivious to the noise and running of the guards and only scrutinized the Count's breathless body. Meanwhile, Hiraku was already at the local cemetery and decided that he had run far enough away and would now be all right. After calming down a bit, Hiraku realized how exhausted he was and decided that therefore he needed to rest. Reflecting on what had happened to him, Hiraku was most surprised by the appearance of the stranger who had ended up helping him avoid seeing the guards. Hiraku realized that his new world was not going to be easy. The still tired guy was bothered by a strange feeling in his right arm. Hiraku was in a depressed state. The guy was troubled by his conscience because he killed a living person, which is a terrible sin. After killing the Count and successfully escaping, several days passed. For the sake of survival and making money, Hikaru turned to the local adventurers guild and registered as an adventurer. It was necessary to become an adventurer, because Hikaru found no other way to make a living in this completely unknown world. Another reason for this choice was the free card of the Adventurers Guild, which in this world can serve as an identity card. Hikaru's first assignment was a quest to collect medicinal poisonous plants. Such quests were perfect for newcomers to the guild. There was no clear indication of how many poisonous flowers to collect. There was no time limit, and the guaranteed reward was 200 jilin. After sneaking into the depths of the forest, Hikaru soon discovered a beautiful white glowing flower. All indications were that this was the plant needed. But suddenly something large and very fast ran out of the bushes, and only by a miracle Hikaru was not knocked down by the powerful creature. The novice adventurer realized that even on such a simple quest, one must always be wary. Taking a closer look at the animal, Hikaru realized that it was just a wild boar that everything had already managed to give him a good scare. But it turned out that there was another monster coming out of the bushes. The terrifying and ferocious looking monster turned out to be a large green wolf that stared intently at Hikaru. The young adventurer knew from the information he had received at the guild that such creatures were always kept in a pack and were incredibly cruel beasts. Such green wolves can smell prey at quite an impressive distance, making them even more dangerous. Hikaru realized that even though a couple of green wolves were busy killing a wild boar, he too was within detection range, and it was a serious threat. But after a few minutes, Hikaru realized to his surprise that the green wolves didn't notice him at all and were only busy with the carcass of the prey. The young adventurer immediately calmed down and thanked the magical blessing given to him, which proved to be a useful tool. The Adventurers Guild card gave some possibilities. The blessing was given according to the soul bar, and each adventurer could change it in their guild card. It was with something like buffs in games that greatly improve certain skills depending on the adventurer's own desire. In the guild map, all this is displayed in the form of different gods, and it appeared that the fewer words in the name of the god, the stronger it is. There were different options such as the god of increasing magic powers, the god of stealth, the god of financial prosperity and the development of large cities, and there were really a lot of options, but Hikaru first paid attention to the god of stealth. Hikaru activated the blessing of the god of stealth almost immediately after receiving the guild card. For Hikaru, as a person with the stealth skill, this god blessing suited him perfectly. Hikaru just quietly began to gather healing poisonous herbs in close proximity to the green wolves, and none of them even realized that there was a person near them. Having gathered enough healing herbs, Hikaru decided that it should be enough to complete the quest, and could now return to the Adventurers Guild and receive his well-deserved reward. Meanwhile, the Adventurers Guild was as crowded and cheerful as ever. Almost all the male adventurers were closely watching the beautiful girl Fleur. They all tried to ask her to have dinner or go for a walk somewhere together, but Fleur rejected all the offers and ignored the guy's attention. Hikaru returned to the guild, immediately said hello to the girl. After all, Fleur worked as a registrar, and she was the one who helped get the guild card. Surprised, Fleur said that Hikaru returned from his mission very quickly, and the adventurers asked where this guy even came from. Hikaru stated that he would like to take a new quest, but Fleur was a little concerned. And then the young adventurer was approached by some strange guys. The three embittered adventurers looked at Hikaru as a defenseless victim, and it was obvious that they were up to something bad. Hikaru decided to find out the intentions of the angry guys' activated detection skills. Hikaru then asked one aggressive guy named Chernenko why he was standing here and wasting his own and others' time. Since he was an adventurer, it was better for him to take some task. But the guy abruptly reached his hands toward Hikaru and asked how dare he even point anything out to him. But Hikaru repelled the arm of the impertinent Chernenko and made it clear that he was not welcome here. In the end, the company of adventurers decided to leave the guild, but at the same time promised Hikaru that they would remember his deed. Hikaru himself realized that this was not the end, and they would wait for the opportune moment. A frightened Fleur asked if Hikaru would be alright. After all, it was still a bad idea to provoke those rude men. The girl explained that they were quite experienced adventurers and could be dangerous. But Hikaru smilingly replied that there was absolutely no need to worry since those guys didn't seem that strong. But Fleur immediately became indignant and exclaimed that it wasn't like that at all, and it was foolish to be so frivolous. Fleur explained that Chernenko was famous in the Adventurer Guild for his incredible physical strength, and it was a very serious opponent. Also, Chernenko has the blessing of a warrior master of wielding one-handed swords. Hikaru was surprised and realized that the daring guy really has a good blessing. Hikaru asked if he correctly realized that Chernenko was able to use the skills of a 5-word god. Fleur confirmed Hikaru's assumption and explained that it was a very strong blessing. Such news did not please Hikaru, and he remembered that when he was given a guild card, he was told that the number of words in a god's name determined an adventurer's rank. 4 words meant high rank, 3 words rare, 2 words legendary, and 1 word determined mythical rank. Hikaru pondered over his blessings. At the moment, he had at his disposal the god of assassination, a shadowy stalker. The god of stealth allowed him to avoid any detection. The inferior god of chaos bestowed the eye of the storm, the god of silent gate, and the god of peaceful urban and rural life. Hikaru realized that in addition to the blessings he already had, he had received new ones after killing the count. Fleur was genuinely worried about the young adventurer and asked if he was alright. Hiraku decided not to spread about his blessings and explained to the admin girl that he was not afraid of those guys at all and tried not to think about them. Hiraku then suggested that we return to the main topic and reminded her that he had successfully completed the task and wanted to receive the reward. Fleur clarified the task information in her journal, which indicated collecting glowing poisonous flowers, and Hiraku handed over a bag of collected medicinal plants. Fleur was surprised that Hiraku had collected all the plants in the sack, and the young adventurer thought that perhaps he had done something wrong. Hiraku explained that he had gathered all the plants he could find and asked if he had put them together wrong. But Fleur replied that she didn't mean that at all. The receptionist explained that places where these glowing flowers grow are usually full of big green wolves. Fleur asked that were these scary monsters completely absent this time. But Hiraku stated that he had seen wolves and they were in the forest. The girl was indignant and couldn't understand why the green wolves didn't attack. And then Fleur decided that apparently Hiraku was just lucky. The young adventurer decided not to reveal all his secrets and agreed with Fleur's opinion. The administrator, pleased with herself, promised to quickly calculate the reward that was due to Hiraku. The wait really wasn't long, and soon a pleased Fleur handed the young adventurer the well-deserved reward. At the sight of the glittering coins, Hiraku's mood immediately improved, although he felt that he had received quite a lot. Hiraku thanked the pretty girl for her fine service. The young adventurer Fleur's words, and she instantly blushed with embarrassment. The girl asked sadly if Hiraku was already going home. But the boy decided to stick around after all, and said that he still had some time and would like to discuss the new assignment. Fleur was glad to have the opportunity to be with the attractive guy for a while as well. She asked if perhaps Hiraku would like her to find the most suitable assignment for him. Hiraku was fine with that, and Fleur promised to make it quick. The attractive receptionist asked to wait for a while and promised to return soon. Hiraku took another look at Fleur's attractive body and realized why she was so popular among adventurers. The girl was indeed very attractive, and she was also able to perfectly communicate with the people she liked. That was why all the adventurers tried to attract her attention to themselves and constantly showered Fleur with compliments. While waiting for the administrator, Hiraku thought about the fact that he still couldn't calm down after killing the count. It had been several days since that evening, but Hiraku had not heard anything about the incident and was wondering what happened to that girl who helped him escape. Soon, the cheerful Fleur returned and was immediately very embarrassed by the stare of the young adventurer. Usually at such times, the girl gave away the redness on her face because her young mind could not yet calmly accept such signs of attention. Fleur asked not to embarrass her, but Hiraku smilingly replied that he did nothing of the sort and there was no need to worry. The young adventurer then abruptly changed the subject and asked if Fleur had heard about the murder of the aristocrat. Judging from the girl's reaction, Hiraku realized that this question came as a surprise to Fleur. The excited receptionist girl whispered that it was classified information, and only a couple of people in the entire city knew about the Count's murder. Therefore, such conversations must be conducted with extreme caution. Fleur inquired how Hiraku even knew about the incident. Hiraku was surprised that the situation was classified and replied that he didn't remember exactly, but had heard about it somewhere. Hiraku assumed that if Fleur knew about it, it meant that there were other adventurers involved. But Fleur immediately rejected such an assumption. The girl explained that people from the government came and asked about the newcomers in the guild. And these people also ordered an investigation to see if anyone from the Adventure Guild was involved in the murder. Fleur also whispered that she should not spread this information because it was really secret and it was all very dangerous. Then Fleur changed the subject and said in a normal voice that she had selected the most suitable assignment for Hiraku. The boy was interested in the proposed tasks and asked for more details. Fleur proudly stated that these tasks were personally selected by the professional registrar, that is, her. Guy thanked her for such personalized care and decided to review the assignments later. At that moment, Fleur confessed that as she thought Hiraku was a bit different from the other adventurers. Fleur explained that usually adventurers rarely thanked anyone for such things and behaved more rudely. This came as a surprise to Hiraku, and he explained that he didn't see anything unusual about thanking someone for caring. After all, it is all basic human courtesy. Fleur blushed again with embarrassment, and Hiraku stated that he had never been treated so nicely before. Fleur's embarrassment reached its maximum level. The beautiful receptionist quietly said that if there were more adventurers like Hiraku, this job could be enjoyed every day. Hiraku couldn't hear the girl's words well, but Fleur replied that she was only thinking out loud and asked what kind of assignment Hiraku would choose. The boy asked for some time to make up his mind. The choice was to choose from tasks of various kinds. One was to clean and buy goods for the church, or to repair the roof on the church. Another task involved unloading coal at the blacksmith shop, and a third task involved talking to the elderly residents of the town. In the end, Hikaru admitted that none of these tasks suited him because they were all too simple and uninteresting. In the end, Hikaru traveled far outside the city to fulfill a quest to capture a red-horned rabbit. Fleur explained that red-horned rabbits have a high level of perception and they are very fast, due to which they are extremely difficult to defeat and catch. After surveying a small area, Hiraku was able to locate the small animal and approached it without much difficulty. This was possible due to the stealth skill, and the red-horned rabbit was unable to sense the presence of a human. The task was to capture this strange monster. The base reward for each rabbit was 10,000 jilin, and a certain number of rabbits caught was not specified. Hikaru immediately realized that this was the perfect assignment for him. Hiraku was actually not very eager to pick up a knife and kill someone again, but now he had a task to accomplish, and so the young adventurer left his prejudices and doubts behind. The red-horned rabbit did not even feel the pain of the lightning fast stabbing, as the sharp blade gave the animal a painless death. After killing the rabbit, Hikaru felt a surge of magical power and decided that if he had such power, then there was definitely someone in this world who had the same skills as him. In this world, there was a rule that if someone killed any creature, their soul level would increase. Hikaru realized that this was exactly what happened to him after killing the red-horned rabbit. The young adventurer immediately remembered looking at the bloody body of the Count and decided that apparently he was able to get an additional enhancement then too. Hikaru then opened his soul window to inquire about the available enhancement points. Hikaru realized that he was gaining points by upgrading his level. That being said, he had saved the points and didn't know what exactly to do with them yet. He needed to distribute them, but it wasn't clear yet how best to do that. Hikaru decided that he would think about it later, but for now he needed to return to the Adventurer Guild. The journey back was not long, and soon Hikaru was on a city street among the many buildings. Thanks to his excellent stealth ability, Hikaru had been able to complete quite a few quests. And right now, his goal was to earn enough money to live on and wait for all the commotion over the Count's murder to subside. Passing by two patrolmen, Hikaru overheard them talking about the very murder of the Count. The patrolmen were discussing that there was some information not entirely reliable that the crime had already been solved. Slowing his step, Hikaru listened to every word and was surprised when one of the patrolmen convinced his partner that the Count's murderer had already been caught. Hikaru was surprised to hear from a patrolman that the murderer of Count Amorx had been caught. It became very curious who they actually caught if he himself is the murderer of the Count. Hikaru realized that he just couldn't wait. He needed to gather more information about this situation as soon as possible. The young adventurer was so thoughtful that he didn't even hear Fleur's words. The girl resented such indifference and asked why Hikaru didn't listen to her at all. Hikaru apologized for his thoughtfulness and asked the girl to repeat herself. Fleur informed in an indignant voice that it would take some time to evaluate the caught red-horned rabbit, and so the reward would have to wait. This was something Hikaru didn't expect and asked why it was so difficult. The old man who approached casually explained that it would take time to balance the horn found better than the Alchemist's Guild and the Apothecary's Guild. Fleur greeted the old man and called him Unken. The strange old man recognized the extracted horn as a fine specimen for which there was no definite market price. Hikaru didn't understand anything he heard and asked Fleur who the old man was. Unken answered the question himself and called himself just an appraiser. Hikaru thought it all sounded kind of strange. Through his perception ability, Hikaru was able to find out the appraiser's status and learned that he was 211 years old and possessed the 51st rank with an available score of 53 units. The old man stated that he would then take the looted rabbit. All this did not particularly please Hikaru, and apparently Unken realized this and asked if the adventurer wanted to ask anything else. But Hikaru replied that it was fine and decided to think it over. Hikaru realized that this old man Unken has power and has similar skills. But the old man has all higher level abilities and also has the ability of mass resolution. Hikaru realized that the old man was able to open the soul board that he himself couldn't open before. And thus Unken was able to collect all 7 soul boards. Hikaru decided that since the old man had such abilities and access to many soul boards, perhaps he was the master of the Adventurers Guild. Unken noticed Hikaru's gaze and asked why he was looking like that, as if he saw a target in front of him. Hikaru explained that he didn't mean to offend in any way at all. but was just wondering how long it would take to evaluate the rabbit. Old Man Unken promised to do it quickly and report the results in the evening. Hiraku thought it was faster than he thought. Unken, however, took the rabbit away before leaving and thanked Fleur. Hikaru inquired if Fleur had finished her work for the day. The girl explained that she had the rest of the day completely free, and if Hikaru wanted to ask for something to help him with, she was ready. Hikaru admitted that he would like to ask Fleur a personal question. The girl clearly did not expect to hear such a thing and asked if now was a good time. Fleur was too embarrassed by the offer to meet, and Hikaru decided to take a walk around the city while there was still time. Walking around the city, Hikaru pondered the information about the invitation he had received at the Travelers Guild, and maybe Fleur knew something about it. Hikaru felt someone's stare and realized that someone was following him, and it was most likely those guys from the Adventurers Guild. It was indeed Trinenko and his buddies, and apparently they wanted to cause trouble. Hikaru decided that he needed to think of something. Hikaru decided to use detection skills and thus gain an advantage over his opponents. With this ability, Hikaru was able to sense Trinenko's intentions even without having to look at him from 10 meters away. Meanwhile, Trinenko and his friends were in a hurry and followed on Hikaru's heels. Hikaru turned a corner abruptly, and Trinenko was glad that his target had reached a dead end and grabbed his weapon. But once Trinenko and his boys were very surprised when there was no Hikaru in the dead-end alley. Trinenko was furious and ordered his partners to search everything, even though Hikaru was actually right in front of him. Hikaru decided not to get into a fight with the daring adventurers and just discreetly leave, as there was simply no time for such foolishness. Thanks to the map, Hikaru found everything he needed. To meet Fleur, they agreed to meet at a beautiful cafe. Hikaru was a little hesitant about his clothes, which were not really suitable for visiting such places. Fleur soon appeared and thanked Hikaru for waiting. Fleur was excited and apologized for her lateness. It was noticeable that the girl was in a hurry, and it made her face red. Hikaru admired the girl's appearance. The lovely pink dress complemented her natural beauty wonderfully. Hikaru confessed that it was very unusual for him to see Fleur not in the uniform of an Adventurer Guild worker. Hikaru admitted that Fleur looked wonderful. The girl blushed again and thanked him for the compliment. Once seated at the table, Hikaru stated that he wanted to ask Fleur a question. Hikaru explained that it was nothing serious and he just wanted to know the truth about an event. The girl hesitated and asked if she understood correctly that Hiraku had invited her to treat her to something delicious at the cafe for a reason. Fleur was a little disappointed and said that she was just a simple person who could share useful information with the newcomers to the guild. Hiraku suggested Fleur to familiarize herself with the menu and promised to buy anything. Fleur agreed, wanting a note of irritation in her voice. Soon Fleur made her choice and asked if she could order it. Hikaru confirmed that he was willing to pay for any choice. The girl was excited about the possibility of a free treat and confessed that she had wanted to try this delicious drink for a long time, and Hikaru thought it would all be a gift for the girl. After a few minutes, the waitress appeared and thanked her for waiting. The prepared fruit smoothie looked quite interesting, but Hikaru was very surprised that there were 2 tubes in the glass. Fleur offered to join her and try the fruit smoothie. Hikaru was embarrassed and refused the idea. But Fleur stated that Hikaru had no choice and should act like a real man and drink with her. Fleur then made a hurt look and asked that if Hikaru didn't like her at all. In the end, the young adventurer wondered and accepted the girl's proposal. Hikaru was the first to take one of the tubes and declared that he was ready to do it. Fleur could not contain her emotions and her flushed face betrayed her embarrassment. But then she also took a pipe and prepared to jointly experience the delicate fruit flavor of the smoothie. The awe-inspiring moment of maximum closeness of the young people also embarrassed Hikaru, who felt the heat on his face but tried to restrain his emotions. Hikaru praised the wonderful flavor of the fruit drink and Fleur agreed with this opinion. Although while doing so, they were both thinking about something else entirely. Fleur enjoyed the flavor and suggested that they continue drinking together. Hikaru was no longer embarrassed and immediately agreed. After the wonderful fruity drink was over, Hikaru offered to cut to the chase and asked if he could ask a question. Fleur agreed and promised to listen to the question. Fleur then warned that asking where she lived would be taboo. Hikaru asked not to worry and promised not to ask any personal questions. But these were all feminine tricks, and Fleur was upset that Hikaru would not take an interest in her life. Hikaru explained that he had heard that Count Amox's murderer had supposedly been captured, and that was the topic that needed to be discussed. From Fleur's look, she didn't really want to discuss such serious topics and asked where Hikaru had heard about it. Hikaru explained that he overheard two patrolmen talking by accident and they were discussing the topic. But Fleur didn't believe it and said that it was simply impossible because such information was secret. Hikaru asked to tell about who exactly turned out to be the Count's killer. But Fleur replied that even if she even wanted to tell about it, she couldn't do it. Fleur apologized for not being able to help Hikaru, and he had only wasted his time. Hikaru asked not to worry and apologized for his persistence. At that, the young adventurer thought that it wasn't worth talking about it anymore. But Fleur herself wondered why Hiraku wanted to know about it so badly. Hikaru explained that a close friend of his had a terrible relationship with this Count, and to be more precise, the Count had been stalking his friend and causing him a lot of trouble. Hikaru admitted that he was very worried, and so he wanted to find out the details with the apprehension of the murderer. Fleur hesitated and thanked Hikaru for his frankness. Fleur ended up revealing that the culprit was the first person who found the Count's body. The murderer was then sent to the royal court, where the fate of the criminal would be decided in 3 days. Hikaru was happy to have some information, and Fleur sipped her flavored tea and said that unfortunately that was all she could say. Hikaru thanked the beautiful Fleur for her help. And then the adventurer realized that if the criminal turned out to be the person who found the body, it means that the girl who helped him was accused. Hikaru felt guilty, even though it was obvious that there was no point in blaming that girl for the Count's murder. Hikaru decided that now he had to hurry, because it was his turn to save the girl who had helped him escape that night. The two carefree sentries were looking forward to finishing their shift and hoping nothing would happen. I didn't quietly go for a drink first and then home to rest. One of the partners was very worried about his service, and the second more experienced sentries calmed him down and explained that all his worries are in vain and everything will be all right. But at this point, the intruder had already entered the premises and remained undetected. Thanks to his stealth skill, Hikaru was now quite confident even in close proximity to the guards, although he didn't think he would ever return to the place where he had committed the murder again. Before coming here, Hikaru had inspected the guard post and the detention center, but in neither of those he had found the girl who had saved him that night. So it's likely that she's still being held at the Count's residence, since there are no other places for such a thing. Hikaru immediately noticed the increased number of guards, which gradually became more and more. This was a sure sign that Hikaru was on the right path. The main thing that remained was to find out what room the girl was in. But unfortunately, all the doors were locked, and Hikaru decided that it would be useful to have some skills to pick locks. While walking down the hallway and pondering exactly how he could open the doors and find the right room, Hikaru unexpectedly encountered a guard dog. One of the guards was indeed patrolling the corridors with the dog. Hikaru decided that he shouldn't worry since he had the blessing of the god of stealth, and it would help him remain undetected even by the animal. But the dog began to act strangely, as if it sensed something. The young guard noticed the dog's anxious behavior as he pointed to one of the doors. The guard decided to check and open the door with his own key to find out the reason for the dog's restlessness. There was no one or anything suspicious in the room, and the guard did his best to reassure his four-legged friend, deciding that apparently the dog was just hungry. Hikaru waited for the guard to disappear around the corner and praised himself for successfully entering the room. But thanks to this situation, Hikaru was convinced how incredible dogs' sense of smell is, and especially so for trained animals. Hikaru was resourceful and took advantage of the dog's ability to identify intruders by scent. To begin with, Hikaru stood at the door and deactivated the stealth skill to leave his scent behind. And then when the dog smelled the odor, Hikaru immediately activated his skill and remained undetected, and the dog led the guard down the wrong path. This whole situation was very dangerous indeed, but Hikaru was glad that everything had been avoided, and now it was to find the right room as soon as possible. Surveying the room, Hikaru noticed a huge number of books on a rather impressive shelving unit. For the sake of interest, the young adventurer took one of the books from the shelf, which turned out to be an adventure story with rather beautiful illustrations. The books all looked alike, and the whole room looked as if it belonged to some boy fond of adventure stories. Although the overly refined interior of the room didn't fit the image of a fan of such stories, and it didn't add up to a coherent picture. Hikaru thought about it and decided to find out why it was like this if possible. Then, taking a closer look at the room, Hikaru noticed a dress that was exactly the same as the girl he was looking for. All this meant that he was exactly in her room, and all that was left was to find the landlady. However, it looked like this room had not been used recently, and that meant that the arrested girl was being kept in a completely different place. Footsteps were heard in the corridor again, and Hikaru realized that once again someone was patrolling the area. The two guards that Hikaru had met at the beginning had returned again. One of the guys was complaining of extreme fatigue and was constantly yawning. But the other guard was more responsible and asked his partner to pull himself together since they were on a mission. The relaxed guy admitted that he had overheard his partner's conversation when he was arguing with his superiors about the investigation. The responsible partner responded that he didn't know why his coworker had had that conversation, but it was pretty silly to assume that the person who discovered the dead body was in fact the killer. Hikaru realized that the guards were just discussing the arrested girl. The relaxed guard complained that she was the reason they were here, even though they should be returning to the capital soon. Then, from the conversation, Hikaru was able to find out that the girl was locked in some nasty basement, and now at least they won't have to search every room, but only to find the basement. Soon Hikaru cautiously reached the stairs leading down, and now remained unnoticed to sneak into the basement. Once on the first floor, after a while Hikaru found the entrance to the basement where the detained girl was supposed to be. There was only one guard at the entrance, who was so sleepy that he probably wouldn't have seen Hikaru even if he hadn't used the stealth skill. But as it turned out, the door to the basement itself was locked, and now it was necessary to find the right key, which was most likely somewhere upstairs. Going upstairs, Hikaru heard strange sounds. As it turned out, the guard guarding the entrance to the basement had come to his colleague and complained that his date with the maid had been ruined because of some guy from the east. The conversation between the two guards turned out to be quite funny and was entirely devoted to the fair sex. The conversation then remained accompanied by jokes about the various maidens they often meet at the local tavern. Meanwhile, Hikaru mentally cursed the two guards, and especially the one who blocked his exit from the basement. Then the cheerful guy who was complaining about the failed date remembered that he just had to check on the captive girl because it was already time. The guy guarding the entrance got the key to the basement, and Hikaru decided that they were just messing with him because he was about to find himself in a difficult situation. Hikaru realized that this corridor was too narrow, and even if he used the stealth skill, those guards would just crash into him. The adventurer's anxiety level rose to the maximum and needed to urgently think of exactly how to deal with this difficult situation. The first thing that came to Hikaru's mind was to use the assassination skill, because he could easily kill two guards at once and thus protect himself. At the same time, Hikaru noticed that the guards had no armor at all and everything should go well, as quick stabs would immediately disarm the careless guards. Such a decision seemed unexpected even to Hikaru himself. The guy realized that he was actually going to seriously kill two innocent people just because he had screwed up and got himself into this bad situation. But in the meantime, the guards were already approaching and were gradually traversing the not-so-long staircase to the basement. Hikaru gripped the handle of the dagger more firmly to be sure and decided that he had to do it, and there was no time to think about the rightness of killing. Fury mixed with fear for his own life significantly increased the adrenaline level in the body of the young adventurer, and Hikaru was ready to strike the fatal blows. But suddenly, an unpredictable situation occurred. The upset maid turned to one of the guards and said that she had learned about him not the most pleasant details from a certain Istoma. The girl accused the amorous guy of constantly changing girls and dating several at the same time. The irritated guard declared that none of this was true, but it sounded too uncertain. The guard accused of adultery noticed that the girl was so angry with him that she showed up to confront him with a knife in her hand. The agitated guard asked the maid to put the knife down and promised to talk things over with her. Both guards changed their minds about visiting the basement and started to go upstairs, much to the delight of the already ready to kill Hikaru. The young adventurer cautiously peeked out from around the corner to make sure that the guards had indeed forgotten about their work and were engrossed in the maid. This was indeed a wonderful gift from fate itself, for Hikaru didn't really want to kill anyone. While the guards were arguing with the maid and one of them was confessing his eternal love, Hikaru was free to get out of the narrow corridor leading to the basement. Hikaru could still hear the maid continue to accuse her lover of cheating and deceit. But now he saw the very key that opened the basement and no one was guarding it. Then came to Hikaru the unpleasant realization that he was close to committing murder again. Hikaru reminded himself how he was going to kill innocent people, and now the rest of his life would be thinking about it. And would now in the future he would constantly have to kill people for the rest of his life. In the end, Hikaru decided that it was all inevitable, and if something suddenly goes wrong, he would have to be prepared to kill. And that is why one must do everything one can to avoid unnecessary sacrifices. The young adventurer thought that now was not the right time to think about all these problems. For now, there were more important tasks and the need to find the captive. Once in the basement, Hikaru noticed that the girl was very beautiful. Louvière was surprised to see someone other than the guards and asked the guy who he was. Hikaru explained that he was the man she helped escape from the balcony, and he was the one who killed the count. So he had come to rescue her to repay his debt. Louvière was not very happy about such a bold act by Hikaru and continued to read the book serenely. The girl explained that she was of course grateful for the help, but unfortunately she would not be able to escape from this cage. Hikaru realized that this is not just a cage, but a real magical prison, and he can't even touch the bars. Louvière explained that this is indeed true, and this cage was built by the head of the Alchemists Guild himself, and he is the only person who can open it. That an ordinary person would be the key to this dungeon was something Hikaru had not anticipated at all. But Louvière explained that of course you can just kill the head of the Alchemists Guild, but it seems unlikely that Hikaru will be able to do so. The young adventurer asked why Louvière was so sure of that. The girl explained that Hikaru's mind was too pure, and he wouldn't be able to just kill an innocent person. All this surprised Hikaru very much, and he asked if the girl didn't want to get out of prison. After all, she had saved him and sacrificed herself. But Miss Louvière replied that she had a reason for that, and so she did not regret what she had done at all. Hikaru stated that if Louvière was willing, he was ready. But the girl did not let the young adventurer finish, and replied that nothing was needed. Hikaru asked in surprise why Louvière didn't want to get free. The girl indifferently replied that she had already accomplished her main task since Hikaru had killed the count. Gradually, Hikaru began to guess all the nuances of the story and asked the girl if by any chance she was the daughter of the very count he had killed. The young adventurer's assumption turned out to be correct, and the girl confirmed her kinship with the victim. Everything turned out to be very strange for Hikaru, because he killed the father of this girl, and she is absolutely indifferent to it. But then Louvière asked her not to look at her so judgmentally. The girl asked if Hikaru had ever been locked in a room or treated like a mere object. Miss Louvière's voice trembled with resentment, and she confessed that she didn't even know when she had last gone outside freely. Hikaru realized that the girl was under house arrest at all times. Louvière explained that her father was afraid of her, but at the same time she could not personally get rid of him because he had quite a high social status. This whole story surprised Hikaru more and more, and the girl wondered if he now understood her wishes. Louvière stated that it was apparently not quite clear to Hiraku why the head of the Alchemists Guild would build this cage and lock an ordinary girl in it. The girl said that now everything will become clear and suddenly began to glow with magical light. Hikaru recoiled from the cage in surprise and did not even restrain himself in profanely expressing his emotions. Hikaru felt the strongest excitement and the influence of a very powerful magic. Louvière explained that she had a huge reserve of magic power, but she could only use destruction magic. The lovely daughter of the murdered count then lowered her magic power level and thanked Hikaru for such an unexpected visit. The girl admitted that she wouldn't have thought that there was anyone at all who would want to help her in such a desperate situation. Miss Louvière smiled genuinely and admitted that she was very surprised to see Hikaru. The young adventurer then inquired as to who exactly had accused Louvière of killing her father. The girl explained her accusation by saying that she was the only one found at the scene of the crime, and so they decided that the blame was on her. And in 3 days, she will be transported to the capital, and there the king will pass his sentence. But in fact, she is going to be sent to the expeditionary forces because the government has learned about her powerful force. And now, under the pretext that she committed a terrible crime by killing her father, they want to use her against the opponents on the battlefield. Louvière has stated that she will simply continue to kill people on the front lines until she herself dies as a common assassin. That is exactly the punishment that is in store for her. Louvière explained that all of this could tarnish the history of the Kingdom of Pansonia, and so her existence would remain classified. Such a prospect for the girl seemed horrible to Hikaru, and he decided to clarify something. The young adventurer asked if he understood correctly that it was because of her incredible magical power that the king wanted to make an assassin out of her and use her for his own purposes. Louvière replied that at least she would at least know that at least someone was worried about her, even if only for her own benefit. After all, she herself has no such feeling for any living creature. Hikaru realized that this girl has already accepted her fate and is completely unwilling to fight. Hikaru could not understand why the girl had given up so easily and why she did not want to live her own life in the future. Louvière in turn advised Hikaru to get out of this basement as soon as possible, as the guards would soon appear, and it would be dangerous for him. Hikaru kept thinking about why he and Louvière were so different in their desire to live and be free. But the captive continued to insist that Hikaru leave and never think of her again. Hikaru paid attention to the girl's trembling hands and wondered why this was happening. For if this was the case, then she had not fully accepted her fate. At the same time, the young adventurer remembered all the many books with adventure stories in the girl's room, and it became even more doubtful that Louvière has finally given up and does not want a free life. Hikaru decided to continue the conversation and asked the girl to recall her name. But the prisoner replied that there was no need to do so, for her name would soon be forgotten anyway. Hikaru thought that he was not going to forget the name of the man who had saved him from being killed. The young adventurer introduced himself and asked the girl to do the same in return. The captive became visibly agitated, and gradually her mental anxieties showed on her beautiful face. Eventually, the girl cried and confessed that her name was Miss Livia Louvière, heir to the Count of Amorques, and could be called simply Livia. Hikaru felt that this was his first victory to change Livia's mind about getting out of this dungeon. The young adventurer then declared that he needed Livia, and this caused a real surge of emotion in the girl, who screamed that it was all wrong. Livia demanded not to say another word, because if Hikaru said one more thing, she would have hope of being saved again, although there was nothing that could be done in this situation. Livia declared that it was enough for her that her vile father was already dead, and she didn't need more. Hikaru rejoiced at his success in the conversation, for he had heard exactly what he wanted to hear. The adventurer declared that despite the fact that Livia had already resigned herself to her fate, he still intended to save her. Hikaru admitted that he really does not wish to kill innocent people, and that is why he will not do it. The young adventurer promised to get the girl out of prison, and in doing so not to kill anyone. Hikaru explained that such an opportunity would come in 3 days when Livia would be transported to the capital. In doing so, he would help despite whether Livia herself wanted to or not. The adventurer recalled how he had unexpectedly appeared in Livia's life by killing her father, and so he intended to do exactly the same this time. An agitated Livia asked if she could really believe Hikaru and if she would be too intrusive in her desires. But the guy asked the captive to calm down and reminded her that in this situation, he was the only one who owed Livia his life. The girl no longer looked as calm and indifferent as she originally was. Now Livia sincerely wished for rescue. Such a change in Livia's mood and mind certainly noticed Hikaru as well. Therefore, he promised to do everything in his power to free the beautiful girl from her imprisonment. Soon indeed, the cellar door opened and noisy guards entered the room, still taking the time to check on the captive. One of the guards turned out to be the commander, who reminded his subordinate to perform his duties in a timely manner and to avoid distractions while on duty. The commander advised his subordinate not to leave his post and just sit reading books, as this would pass the time and keep him in his place. The regular guard excused himself and promised that such a thing would not happen again. The guards made sure that Livia had not gone anywhere and was just sleeping and continued to chat. The commander, already more friendly, advised his subordinate not to worry about his friend who had problems with the maid, because such things usually end quickly. Livia, at this point, of course, did not sleep, because the new emotions simply did not allow it. All the young girl's thoughts were now only about the possibility of escape. Meanwhile, Hikaru realized that time was very short, as there were only 3 days left to prepare Livia's daring rescue. Fleur was happily reading the reports of the adventurers' completed tasks and attracted Gloria, who rushed to find out why. Gloria said that she had heard rumors about a newcomer who was obsessed with the gorgeous Fleur. The embarrassed admin girl exclaimed that Hikaru wasn't like that at all. Gloria demanded details about the newcomer, but Fleur, citing her busyness, hurriedly retired to the guild's inner room. Meanwhile, Hikaru decided that before he could save Livia, he needed to do something, and the most important thing was to make money. Since money is needed to live in peace, and also not useful for hiding the girl after her rescue. Finding himself in the Adventurers Guild was surprised to see for so much admin another girl, and decided that apparently Fleur has a day off. Hikaru wondered what the Adventurers Guild was even counting on with all these hotties as staff. And is there really a metric that says that the survival rate of adventurers is higher if the guild employs beautiful receptionists? Of the available quests, there appeared to be only 2 quests. One was to clean the church for only 25 jilin. The other was to shop for an elderly grandfather and was valued at 15 jilin. It was all too easy and promised too small a reward. Hikaru had already found out that adventurers had many ranks. The highest rank was a rank, but the lowest was G rank, and of course there was also the highest as rank, but it was rare. Hikaru, because he was only G rank, could not take a good assignment, and the red-horned rabbit was still being evaluated by the guild master. The affable Gloria noticed the young adventurer and wondered if he was looking for new quests. The girl turned out to be quite unassuming and asked to familiarize herself with Hikaru's guild map, and then asked if the guy had any requests. Hikaru wondered why this girl was even talking to him and noticed the lists of new announcements in her hands. Deciding that he was in no danger, Hikaru handed the young beauty his guild card and waited impatiently for Gloria's next move. The admin girl scrutinized the information in the guild card and thought that it was very unfortunate. Gloria was disappointed that such an ordinary person was the very adventurer who was pursuing Fleur. Gloria immediately downgraded Hikaru's attractiveness to herself, for he was not from a noble family, and he had absolutely no family name. And the blessings that Hikaru could boast of were like those of an ordinary person, although he was certainly someone who wouldn't make Fleur angry. After finishing studying the information about Hikaru, Gloria returned the guild card. In the end, Gloria concluded that there was still something special about this ordinary guy and decided to find out what it was. Gloria asked if Hikaru had any other blessings besides civilian blessings, and since she was an official employee of the Julius Adventurers, Hikaru should answer her question, especially since Fleur probably already knew about it. Hikaru suspected Gloria of being deceitful and replied that he had no other blessings besides those mentioned in the guild card. Gloria smiled amiably and thought that is Hikaru really an ordinary citizen? But Gloria's all-female intuition told her that he was not. Gloria decided that of course this adventurer was hiding a lot, and it was Fleur who advised Hikaru not to spread his true capabilities. Gloria's imagination had no limits, and she decided that her friend Fleur had gotten herself an amazing adventurer. And Hikaru turned out to be such a unique person that Fleur decided to withhold his blessings. Gloria's imagination created her the most incredible abilities she thought Hikaru possessed. Convincing herself of her own assumptions, Gloria also thought that Hikaru must already be enchanted by her beauty and attention, and politely offered to accept one of the requests. Gloria explained that the assignment was to deliver a message, and so Hikaru would be able to handle it very quickly since it was perfect for civilians like him. Hikaru asked that is it really that simple? The quest was to deliver the letter to the wizard Kelbeck in Bond City. The reward was promised to be 200 jilin. Hikaru decided that it was a perfectly acceptable quest and promised to fulfill it today. Gloria offered to discuss the details of the assignment with her. The girl, showing maximum charm and smiling all the time, offered to wait for her at the reception desk. Gloria decided to herself that the mysterious man Hikaru seemed to have a very dark past, since he was so secretive. Still, after getting out of the Adventurers Guild, Hikaru was happy to receive such a quest, for which he would receive good money. And the quest itself did not look too difficult. But as it turned out, difficulties were still in the way of the young adventurer, and it was necessary to show all his skills of stealth. Hikaru found himself in the right place located on the shore. It was very strange that anyone could live in such a place, because everywhere was an unbearable stench. Hikaru activated stealth so that he wouldn't have to worry about being attacked by bats, which were very abundant in this dark place. Creeping through the dark route surrounded by thousands of flying bats, Hikaru wasn't sure if it was even possible to turn on a flashlight in such an unfriendly place. But soon a whole flock of bats were startled by the light and noise of two men who were patrolling the area. The two were discussing a meeting with some client who was offering a great job for good money. One of the guys even stated that it would have been much easier to kill the target and take what was needed than to engage in theft. The second interviewee reminded them that they didn't have to kill anyone during this assignment. The second guy agreed and reminded them that their boss didn't like to spill blood. The two patrolmen then noticed strange footprints, but eventually decided that they must have been left by the orphans who have been snooping around more and more lately. So there was no need to worry and they could continue patrolling. Hikaru wasn't satisfied with the fact that even with the stealth skill, he was leaving traces everywhere, and that was very bad. Hikaru decided to be much more careful so that he wouldn't make the same mistakes in the future. That's why while Hikaru was in the city, once again checked how effective his stealth skill was. While researching, Hikaru found out that life detection, blocking, and magic detection blocking only prevented people with those abilities from being detected. It also found out that there is a perception blockage that makes a person invisible to others even if coming right in front of someone. But if Hikaru waved or clapped his hands in front of people's faces, they noticed him immediately. But even if people looked at Hikaru closely, they immediately stopped noticing him again after looking away for even a moment. And if one also added the blessing of the god of stealth, Hikaru stopped being virtually an invisible person altogether. Now, Hikaru decided that it was still not a good idea to turn on the light, as it spread far away and was reflected from various sources, so it was better to forget about using the flashlight altogether. Meanwhile, the two chatty patrolmen decided to go to Kelbeck's-sen as soon as possible, because he is a rather harsh boss and might get angry if they are late. Hikaru immediately recognized Kelbeck's given name, for it was the one listed in his quest. The two guys continued to discuss the nuances of the future quest and their boss's decisions, gradually moving away from the lurking Hikaru. At the same time, the young adventurer became even more interested in the mysterious Kelbeck, who was most likely a former armorer. Although judging from the appearance of the two guys and their manner of communication, it was obvious that there must definitely be something else here that Hikaru had yet to find out about. The central building around which the patrolmen were walking was also well guarded, and there were two guards constantly on duty near the entrance doors. Eventually, the two patrolmen did get to their boss Kelbeck and immediately felt his wrath. Kelbeck accused his underlings of being 5 minutes late. One of the guys immediately accused his partner of being late because of a meeting with some broad. A confrontation immediately began between the guys, but Kelbeck ordered them to shut up immediately. The angry boss decided not to get into which of the two guys was at fault and stated that they would both be held responsible for their tardiness. But then Kelbeck laughed, enjoying his subordinate's fear, and declared that they had both actually done a pretty good job. The boys immediately exhaled a sigh of relief and quieted their fear a bit. Both partners asked permission to go about their business while the boss was still in a good mood. Kelbeck gave permission to remove himself and reminded his subordinates to be more careful next time. After both guys left the boss's room, Hikaru decided to prove himself as well. The young adventurer deactivated his stealth skill and simply said hello to the mysterious Kelbeck. The landlord instantly flared up with anger and asked the stranger who he was. Hikaru apologized for such a sudden appearance and explained that he didn't want to make any unnecessary fuss at all, much less fight with anyone. Kelbeck was trying to figure out who this guy was and how he was able to get into his room by bypassing the guards. Meanwhile, Hikaru pulled a letter out of his pocket and explained that it was addressed specifically to Kelbeck. The landlord was suspicious of the letter, as it could be a clever magic trap that would easily kill him. Kelbeck remained tense and did not lower his dagger. Realizing the danger of the situation, Hikaru asked if this wasn't what Kelbeck himself had ordered. Hikaru explained that he was just a messenger and needed to deliver this letter to a man named Kelbeck, and it would be nice if he didn't get the address wrong as he wanted to get paid for his assignment. Kelbeck gradually began to get angry with himself as he couldn't understand why he was so afraid of some ordinary kid. Eventually, Kelbeck put the dagger away and stepped forward to pick up the letter. Quickly unrolling the scroll, Kelbeck found out that the message was addressed from the Adventurers Guild of Adventurers, and the degree of danger in the mind of the landlord dropped dramatically. Reading the letter, Kelbeck was surprised to see such a strange messenger from the Adventurers Guild, for Hikaru did not look like an experienced adventurer at all. Kelbeck stated that he had one question, but Hikaru beat his host to it and said that apparently Kelbeck wanted to know how he got here. Kelbeck was astonished at such impertinence and demanded that Hikaru explain himself. Kelbeck then, as the master of the house, suggested, though judging from his tone, rather ordered Hikaru to sit at the table. Kelbeck asked the messenger his name. And after Hikaru introduced himself, Kelbeck asked him to explain exactly who he had made arrangements with to get through here. The landlord's question was not entirely clear to the young adventurer. Hikaru stated that he had made absolutely no arrangements with anyone or anything of the sort, but had simply taken and passed inside. Such an answer provoked anger and caused Kelbeck to jump up on the spot, and then the master barked at Hikaru not to dare to lie. Hikaru decided to remain silent and not to develop the conflict in any way. And Kelbeck rushed to the front door to find out how the young insolent man could get into his house. Kelbeck asked the guards at the door if they had seen the strange young fellow pass by them. But the guards confidently replied that no one could pass them, and that they themselves had not gone anywhere for a moment. Kelbeck resented the incompetence of his guards, who had simply failed to notice the intruder. This left the guys at the door confused, for they really didn't see anyone and didn't understand what was going on at all. Kelbeck returned to the room thinking that if Hikaru had been sent by the Adventurer Guild, he should have been stopped on the steps at the entrance and sent back. And anyway, no one had ever entered this room like this before. Kelbeck agreed that his experienced guards had not noticed Hikaru pass by and asked what the adventurer wanted to talk to him about. Hikaru asked if his unnoticed appearance was merely a fluke in the guard's work. Kelbeck irritably replied that perhaps that was indeed the case and today was not a good day for his guards. But at the same time, another thing was surprising. How did such a young adventurer have the courage and audacity to show himself in front of an honorable citizen in such a devious way? Hikaru was thanked for his appreciation of his stealth abilities and asked to sign a special form. Kelbeck was already quite tired of the presence of the young and brash adventurer and quickly signed the required document and then stamped it, for which he was thanked by Hikaru. Afterward, the young adventurer decided to bid his host a quick farewell and return to the guild for his reward. But unexpectedly, Kelbeck asked his guest to stay for a while. In a rather calm voice, Kelbeck inquired who Hikaru really thought he was. Hikaru briefly stated that Kelbeck was most likely a wizard or a member of some secret organization with a similar status. Hikaru immediately asked how much his assumptions matched reality. Kelbeck ignored the question, and Hikaru said that he was basically uninterested in the whole thing. Kelbeck explained that apparently Hikaru did not understand what he was being told at all and needed to be more aware of who he was talking to. Kelbeck explained that the outsiders referred to them as the Thieves Guild. And while it's possible they may indeed be perceived as common thieves, they never steal from ordinary people. Hikaru replied that it was understandable, for otherwise they wouldn't be talking so calmly right now, already fighting trying to kill each other. In the end, Kelbeck seemed like a very benevolent person to Hikaru. After all, the head of the Thieves Guild said that if Hikaru ever needed his help, it would be enough to just say his name and Kelbeck will definitely help in any situation. At the same time, Kelbeck explained that any help he gave would certainly not be gratuitous and one should think carefully before approaching him. Hikaru advised his new acquaintance not to spoil relations with the Adventurers Guild, for it would be much better for him. Hikaru headed out, and Kelbeck admitted to himself that this young guy even scared him a little. And it is immediately clear that he is quite good in his abilities, and so one should take a closer look at him. Meanwhile, in the Adventurers Guild, the cheerful Gloria serving the adventurers remembered Hikaru, for she was very interested in how well his assignment was progressing. The girl was well aware that he was currently in the territory of the Thieves Guild, and even if Hikaru is a representative of the Adventurers Guild, it would not help him at all. Gloria was looking forward to the moment when she would be contacted by the representatives of the Thieves Guild. After all, then she would be able to appear at the most opportune moment and rescue the young adventurer Hikaru, and after that he would always be in her debt. So it was only a matter of waiting for the right moment. Gloria automatically invited the next adventurer to the counter and immediately heard the familiar voice of Hikaru, who asked if everything was alright in the guild while he was away. Hikaru stated that he had come to account for the task he had completed and provided a signed document to prove his words. Hikaru then noticed the girl's strange look and asked if she was alright. Gloria immediately laughed and explained that she was only thinking. Gloria asked if Hikaru had an easy time meeting Kelbeck. The adventurer was reluctant to give details and explained that nothing supernatural had happened during the meeting. Gloria tried her best to hide her surprise under the mask of a silly girl and said she was glad to hear of Hikaru's success. In the end, the calculating girl gave Hikaru the well-deserved reward of 200 Jilin and reminded herself that Kelbeck was the head of the Thieves Guild and in charge of the entire underground. And now it is completely incomprehensible how someone as ordinary looking as Hikaru could so easily meet such a mysterious person. Hikaru then habitually called Gloria by Fleur's name and said it was time to move on. And Gloria was left with an incredible sense of curiosity about this young adventurer. A reward of 200 Jilin in just one day was quite a good result, although a much larger sum was needed for complete peace of mind. Hikaru was distracted from thinking about money by the guild master and stated that he had met him just in time. Hikaru greeted Old Man Unken, who in turn informed the adventurer of the sale of a red-horned rabbit at a very good price. Hikaru was immediately interested in the amount, and it turned out to be unbelievable and amounted to 147,500 Jilin. Such a huge sum caused the young adventurer a real euphoria, because he could not even imagine that for that small animal could get more than 140,000. The guild card worked just like a bank card and allowed any adventurer to borrow money from any other adventurer guild if needed. Old Unken clarified if he understood correctly that Hikaru wanted to take the 47,000 with him and leave the remaining 100,000 for safekeeping at the guild. Hikaru confirmed his decision and felt the pleasant heaviness of the money pouch. Hikaru was pleasantly surprised by the incredible value of the red-horned rabbits, because he hadn't even expected to receive such a colossal reward for such an easy task. But the main thing was that now he didn't have to worry about money at all. But before leaving the Adventurers Guild, Hikaru decided to find out something and asked Old Man Unken if he could ask him some questions. Thanks to the red-horned rabbit, the collection of the necessary amount of money to save the beautiful Livia was complete. And now Hikaru only had two important things to do. First was to gather information about Libya's relocation, and the second was to raise his too small level. Once in the dense forest, Hikaru realized that he had found the right place where he could hunt monsters and quietly increase his skill level. The day before, after receiving a substantial reward for catching a red-horned rabbit, Hikaru decided to utilize Unken's knowledge and ask the old man some questions. The young adventurer asked the guild leader if there was any dangerous monster nearby that it was advisable not to cross paths with in order to avoid getting into trouble. The shrewd Unken realized the ambiguity of the question and asked why Hikaru was interested in this. Hikaru immediately guessed that the old man Unken had sensed something due to his incredibly developed intuition skill and therefore needed to be very careful while communicating. Hikaru, trying to speak as convincingly as possible, explained that he needed to avoid approaching such a monster because he only wanted to hunt in the forest for a while and perhaps even go deep into the forest itself. The young adventurer even spread his hands for more convincing and said apprehensively that he just wanted to know where it would be best to stop so as not to get into too dangerous a situation. It was unclear from old Unken's face whether he believed Hikaru's words or not, but the guild leader still said that one should beware of the 4 kinds of monsters. Old Unken listed the monsters in order of their danger, designating the green wolf first, then the stray bee, the forest barbarian, and finally the goblin. Hikaru asked in surprise that are goblins really that dangerous as well? The head of the Adventurer Guild explained that this was indeed the case and recounted a recent situation in which a man had encountered a goblin near his settlement and then a real tragedy occurred. After all, what people say that if there is one goblin, there are actually at least 300 of them around is absolutely true, and one must remember that. Hiraku realized that goblins were indeed a source of danger and thanked Unken for the warning. The young adventurer then confessed that this was the first time he had heard of wandering bees and forest barbarians and had no idea what these monsters were. Old Unken, with the appearance of a wise teacher, declared that a stray bee is a peculiar bee with degenerated wings. Normally, such bees move one at a time, but they can summon their mates in just 1 second, in which case they will attack as a group. As for the forest barbarian, it should be understood that this monster is at least 3 meters tall with 4 powerful arms. Unken was quite thorough in describing this monster as a one-eyed, ferocious predator with a physique more like a human. But the surface of its body was completely smooth and covered with a pile of muscle. Hikaru agreed that from the description, this guy really must look like a real monster. Unken advised to just stay away from such monsters and then everything would be fine. Hikaru thanked him for the valuable information and asked if he could find out the places exactly where he should not go to avoid meeting those horrible creatures. The head of the Adventurers Guild was already visibly tired of this conversation and sighed heavily and advised him to simply not go deep into the forest and at the foot of the mountains. No less dangerous place is the Eastern Lake, as in that place there is a huge population of a variety of monsters that immediately attack anyone who approaches the body of water. Hikaru decided that he had already received all the information he needed, and in order not to arouse more suspicion from Old Unken, thanked him for his help and was about to leave for the forest. In order to get the best results during the hunt, Hikaru immediately went to the Eastern Lake, which was indicated by Old Man Unken as the most dangerous place with an incredible number of monsters. Since the time was too short, the young adventurer decided not to wait for the attack, but to find the prey himself. At the same time, Hikaru was well aware that now it is not profitable for him to kill all sorts of small monsters, because it is the opposite of reducing his rate and will be lost precious time. Therefore, it is necessary to concentrate on the search for dangerous monsters, and the more such monsters can be destroyed, the more his level will increase and become much more available development points, and this is the priority. Hikaru also decided that he did not want to spend a lot of effort on a large number of monsters, and therefore he himself would not want to face goblins or stray bees, because they are too weak monsters alone, and destroying numerous groups would take too much time and effort. Therefore, the best choice remains the forest barbarian or green wolf. After traveling only a few meters after he remembered this monster, Hikaru found a rather large green wolf nearby, and decided that he shouldn't miss such a good chance to gain experience. The green wolf looked like a really threatening creature, and this time it was much bigger than the ones Hikaru had met while collecting medicinal herbs. Quickly taking out his dagger, the young adventurer remembered that the green wolf has a very highly developed sense of smell, and it can reach a distance of up to 200 meters. Therefore, these mighty animals can always determine the degree of danger and decide whether to run away or attack. Hikaru decided that his only and most important advantage in this battle would be his stealth skill, and it alone would help him get close to the green wolf undetected. Everything went exactly as Hikaru had planned. The young adventurer managed to approach the green wolf unnoticed, and he sank the blade of the dagger into the shaggy body with all his might, all the way to the hilt. The mighty huge animal let out its last death roar, and after a few minutes, the green wolf's agony ceased. All this time, Hikaru had remained undetected by the monster and was completely safe. Such a quick victory was possible thanks to the assassin's skill. But unfortunately, this skill had a side effect. In case the killing was done covertly, all the pain received by the victim would return to the killer. This effect did not take long, and Hikaru felt all that he awarded a few minutes ago green wolf, and it was a very unpleasant surprise. It took a few minutes to endure, and gradually the pain in his body faded away. Hikaru immediately decided to check his soul window and was pleasantly surprised. After all, he didn't even expect that by killing just one green wolf, he would be able to rise a whole level. At the same time, the young adventurer realized that he now felt much less horror at killing someone. There is no longer the excitement and anxiety before killing as before, and everything is done almost on automatic. Looking at his reflection in the bloody blade of the dagger, Hikaru realized that it was probably a habit. After all, man is really such a creature that can get used to anything, including killing, even for the sake of achieving goals. The realization of all this frightened Hikaru's young mind, and he decided that he simply had to learn to control such a desire and use it only when necessary, so as not to become a monster like the inhabitants of this forest. Hikaru remembered how yesterday he had tried to kill innocent people because of his own mistake and negligence. And so after that incident, the adventurer decided to make a set of binding rules for himself. Hikaru obligated himself to be sure to kill anyone if he did decide to commit such a murder. It was also necessary to be prepared for absolutely any surprises while using the stealth skill. Another important rule was that when he would move on a clearly planned plan, he would need to think of all possible situations ahead of time. At the same time, the young adventurer of course realized that the skill of secrecy was excellent for the dispute of any information, and it was his big trump card when performing various tasks. Wiping his dagger on the grass, Hikaru decided to continue his journey in the same spirit. At this moment, Hikaru was at level 8, and that was already a good result. But Hikaru didn't want to distribute the experience points now, but decided to do it later, because now he needed to earn as many points as possible before darkness fell. Hikaru was sure that with this pace, he would soon reach level 10, and maybe even level 20. After eating a bit, Hikaru decided to resume his search for monsters, and wondered who he would come across next time. But suddenly "where are you" from strange sounds were heard from outside, as if someone was fighting someone. Curiosity began to prevail over caution, and Hikaru decided to go and find out what was really going on. In the meantime, a group of adventurers were battling a horde of ferocious goblins nearby. No matter how hard the adventurers tried to defeat the goblins, they became more and more numerous, and gradually the adventurers became surrounded. The swordswoman Pia realized the complexity of the situation and asked the healer Paula to stay behind her, as they are no use in battle. Next to them was a third friend, the archer Priscilla, who also could not influence the course of the battle with her sharp arrows. Paula was incredibly frightened by the crowd of angry goblins and realized that now they were unlikely to get out alive and with such a terrible situation. Only now did the girl healer realize that they shouldn't have come here at all. Paula remembered how in the Adventurers Guild, she had immediately sensed something wrong when their all-female team had been approached to join forces for a joint adventure. A group of fellow adventurers of a very dubious appearance were about to go collecting rare plants on the Eastern Lake. And these fellows offered to keep them company, as they thought it would be easier and more fun. At that moment, Pia did absolutely the right thing and immediately refused, and then advised the guys to look for someone else to travel with. But the leader of the male adventurous team promised a great opportunity to earn good money. This was the turning point in the whole story. Pia, who had been meaning to upgrade her gear for a long time, thought about the possibility of easy money. Eventually, the swordswoman agreed to the offer and began discussing financial matters with her new companions. Pia liked the terms, and the girl immediately began urging her friends to support her. Pia said that this is a great opportunity to improve the financial condition of their team, because constantly not enough for anything. Paula tried to dissuade her friend and advised her to think carefully before embarking on a dangerous journey with strangers, but everything was already decided. Pia asked Paula to remember well what they had become adventurers for in the first place. Paula of course remembered and immediately stated that their goal was to earn a lot of money and help underprivileged villages. Pia exclaimed that then there was no problem and they should take up any opportunity to achieve their goal. Pia inquired about Priscilla's opinion, but the archer girl as usual expressed absolutely no emotions or desires, as if she was constantly under the influence of the medicinal herbs marlabob. Pia explained that if they sent all the money they earned on this mission, many villages would be happy and could buy useful items. Paula agreed with this noble motivation for this journey, but reminded her that it was very dangerous on the Eastern Lake. But the bald guy with the huge sword declared that there was no cause for concern, because everyone had long known that there were no more monsters in the Eastern Lake. And even if there were any monsters left, he would personally deal with them with his invincible sword. The leader of the men's team began to assure Palu that there was no need to worry so much, because by uniting the two teams, they would be able to defeat anyone. And if any surprise happened, they could always quickly retreat and leave the forest. The guy tried his best to appear friendly and attractive. The team leader promised that he would personally look out for and protect a beautiful healer like Paula. In the end, the young girl Paula could not resist the charm of the handsome young man and agreed to go on the journey with her friends. But as it turned out later, it was the silliest mistake of her short life. Now, of course, Paula regretted that she had agreed then and could not dissuade her friends from this foolish trip. For now, they were all in a death trap, with absolutely no chance of escape. Despite their self-confidence and exaggeration of their own strength, the men's team fought quite decently against a huge number of goblins, but the forces were certainly not equal, and the first to receive a serious wound from an arrow was the bald guy with a huge sword. The adventurers from the men's team were surprised that the goblins started using arrows, because at the beginning of the battle there was no such thing. And it could only mean one thing: if they started using arrows, then it meant the entire goblin family was already here. Paula is in the process of healing the bald guy asked what the goblin family meant. The wounded adventurer explained that if that was the case, then nothing good could be expected since the head of the family was somewhere nearby and leading all the others. The frightened adventurers realized that they would now be unable to cope with the huge number of goblins, especially under the leadership of the head of their family, and so they needed to think of something for their salvation. One of the adventurers regretfully stated that he had just had time to rejoice as they had met some very beautiful adventurer girls, and now his plans were at an end. Fear breeds in people the basest feelings and the vilest deeds. Alas, that is what happened this time. One of the adventurers asked the healer Paula if she knew what the goblin's real purpose was. Paula didn't understand where this conversation was going and frankly admitted that, of course, she didn't know. The fellow adventurer, with a wicked grin, stated that the true purpose of the goblins is to breed, and goblins are always eager to capture the women of humans and force them to give birth to new offspring for them. So it is the beautiful female adventurers who are the true goal of goblins in this battle. Gradually, Paula began to realize where this conversation was leading, and after being grabbed by the arm, her suspicions were justified. The fellow adventurer said that she was a big girl and should realize that she could not do otherwise. The evil guy explained that if they gave Paula as a sacrifice, everyone else would surely be saved. But even such a seemingly grateful role did not please the young healer at all, and Paula began to resist with all her might, although her chances were practically zero. The other adventurous boys, meanwhile, began to distract Pia and Priscilla, so that they would not have time to react and try to help their doomed friend, who according to their plan should be the salvation of all. In the meantime, the frightened girl was being dragged towards the goblins by two boys and reminded that it was her duty as a true healer to save the lives of others, and that is what she would do now. In the end, the young body of the adventuress was just rudely thrown to the ground like a useless thing in the immediate vicinity of the maddened goblins. The goblins immediately reacted to such an unexpected gift in the form of a beautiful healer and began to approach Paul with surprise. The girl was numb with fear and only saw in front of her the horrible half-rotten teeth of the goblins, which gritted from the future pleasure. The joyous cries of the goblins resembled the horrible singing of hyenas, and the doomed Paula realized that she never needed to stop being an adventurer, for she could do anything in her life. Before her imminent end, the healer remembered how she had once dreamed of growing up and moving to the big city, then to meet a handsome young man and unite their destinies. So naive she had thought before, but now she realized that she had actually been a complete fool. And now the rest of her life, her destiny will be to procreate for the sake of the continuation of the vile goblin race. Healer Paula, seeing the horrible monsters running towards her, thought that it was better to die than to condemn herself to such a fate. The adventuress closed her eyes and sincerely wished herself to die this minute. But to her surprise, Paula did not feel the ugly hands of the goblins on her young body, but heard an unfamiliar voice that asked if she was all right. The healer cautiously opened her eyes and saw an unfamiliar guy who was holding out a saving hand to her. From surprise, the girl blushed and did not know how to react properly, because just a few seconds ago she had said goodbye to her life and freedom. Hikaru, realizing that he was wasting precious time, quickly asked Paula if she could get to her feet, but the girl was in a state of shock from the overabundance of various impressions and so decided that this was her fateful meeting. The goblins were unwilling to part with such coveted prey as the young healer and continued to advance. Hikaru asked Paula to stay behind and be careful, but admiring Hikaru's heroism, the girl was not well aware of what exactly was going on around her and called her savior handsome. Maddened by the sudden rush of love feelings, Paula screamed that Hikaru will get only her and pounced on the not expecting such a reaction Hikaru. The young adventurer freed himself from the embrace of the overexcited healer and asked what was even going on with her. But at that moment, there were complaints from the fellow adventurers about Hikaru's unexpected interference in other people's affairs. One of the enraged adventurers shouted that if the useless healer was a sacrifice for the goblins, then everyone else would be able to escape the real enemies of the goblins. Hikaru finally realized what kind of people he had met and who should be helped here and who shouldn't be helped at all. Hikaru stated that the whole thing was more like not a noble sacrifice, but rather tough, scared guys abandoning a fragile girl to run away in time. The adventurer didn't think to justify himself at all, but only stated that there was nothing wrong with saving more useful and worthy people. Pia heard all this and became indignant. Pia and Priscilla realized exactly what the leader of the men's team wanted to do to Paula and were ready to get even right away. But the frightened adventurer asked what to do with all those goblins now. But Hikaru promised that all the goblins would soon all run away on their own. This only caused the sword-wielding adventurer to laugh hysterically. Suddenly, a ferocious roar sounded from the forest, which did not promise anything good. The goblins began to shriek fearfully and dart from side to side, then scattered in panic. Hikaru proudly declared that it was just as he said, and then suggested that they get away quickly because it was getting too dangerous. The team of fellow adventurers were the first to hurriedly flee, not really caring about the fate of the others. Hikaru only gave the despicable cowards a disdainful glance. Priscilla and Pia thanked Hikaru for saving Paula, but the young adventurer only inquired if they were all right and if none of them were injured. The girls turned out to be fine, and as for Paula's condition, everyone decided that since she was a healer herself and possessed healing magic, she would help herself somehow. Pia couldn't control her anger and stress, and she was shaking badly. The girl asked if Hikaru was not going to leave since he had warned about the danger, and if he was really confident in his abilities. Hikaru asked the girls to calm down and suggested that they had better take a debt from their companions. Hikaru explained that he was referring to the guys who had cheated them and wanted to leave them. And if word spread about them about what happened here in the first place, then no one would ever want to cooperate with that team of adventurers again. But unless of course they spread the rumors personally. Pia didn't quite understand what she was talking about. The soft-spoken Priscilla explained that it was about a non-disclosure agreement. Pia exclaimed that it was nonsense in general, but Hikaru confirmed the archer's words. Hikaru explained that it was all for their safety. Pia pointed out the two guys who immediately ran away, and since they are common fools, they might do something. Hikaru asked if they were close friends. But according to the girls, they were just guys from the same village as them, and so it wasn't worth focusing on them. Hikaru was not too eager to get into the problems of the other adventurers, and said that now the girls could do as they saw fit, and it was time for him to get on with his tasks. But in coming to her senses, Paula exclaimed that she did not want to part with her savior. Paula had indeed come to her senses, and may not have even remembered what exactly she was doing not so long ago. The girl introduced herself and asked Hikaru to tell her name. The young man was not at all surprised by the girl's strange behavior and introduced himself. But then the annoying healer asked Hikaru to escort their group to the eastern lake. Pia also thought it was a great idea and tried to ask Priscilla's opinion. But the archer once again remained silent and only made some unintelligible sound, which was taken as agreement. In the end, the young adventurer could not resist the pressure of the three beautiful girls and agreed to help. Hikaru explained that he would be observing the group of adventurers from a far distance, and so they could go at any pace. Healer Paula's loving eyes filled with tears of disappointment, and she asked in a trembling voice that if Hikaru would not go along with them. The adventurer thought that he really didn't have the strength to protect them all, and said that he had already given his consent to accompany them, so there could be no further questions. At the same time, Hikaru skillfully found an excuse not to be around and admitted that he was a little embarrassed in front of the other girls because of that awkward moment at the beginning of meeting Paula. Pia stated that she and Priscilla had really noticed that Paula was very strange lately, and she had also started secretly writing a love affair. Such a revelation, the girl healer couldn't stand it, and literally flashed red with embarrassment and started yelling at her friends. The girls continued on their route while Hikaru pondered over his own tasks. The adventurer praised himself that he had gathered the necessary information beforehand and now knew how to get rid of the goblins. But no sooner had he gotten rid of the team of adventure girls than they found themselves surrounded by goblins again. It turned out that the adventure girls were surrounded by a huge number of goblins, which was a whole family, and it is unlikely that these beautiful maidens will be able to adequately repel such an attack. Hikaru realized that if there were only a few goblins, he could defeat them, but a whole family he could not defeat. However, there was another way out of this difficult situation. Soon the leader of the goblins himself showed up, who was very different from his kin. Hikaru remembered how the manual said that if the main boss was defeated, all the other goblins would scatter in terror. The appearance of the main goblin, he was too defiant and did not inspire hope that he was weak. So Hikaru decided to increase the strength of his muscles just in case. Applying his excellent stealth tax, Hikaru very quickly and stealthily approached the back of the chief goblin and plunged his trusty dagger to the hilt. The goblin boss screamed in pain and a fountain of blood erupted from his stinking mouth. A few seconds later, the main pride of the goblin family fell dead on the ground, and it caused a real shock to the entire goblin population. Hikaru once again felt the reckoning of using the assassin skill and felt a piercing pain in his entire body. But the consolation was that Hikaru's rank had risen 3 steps at once and reached the 11th level. Now it was time to verify the authenticity of the instruction about the goblins and wait for them to scatter in horror at the loss of their leader. But at that moment, Hikaru heard the girl's piercing scream and realized that if the man was still in danger, there was no point in waiting for the goblins to react and had to intervene. Hikaru decided not to waste time and realized that he had to accelerate and used instantaneous movement. The young adventurer was in time to save the healer Palu with a precise dagger strike. Soon after the goblins scattered, the 3 beautiful adventurers, accompanied by Hikaru, reached the huge lake, and the boy said that the further journey would be much safer. Pia thanked on behalf of her entire team for their help. After a touching farewell to the girls, Hikaru finally felt calm and decided to resume his monster hunt. After a while, Hikaru returned to the city and was surprised at how quickly the day had passed, although he had managed to raise his rank quite a bit. The last monster Hikaru managed to destroy was a huge forest barbarian. After distributing the experience points, Hikaru had 10 more units left in reserve, and Hikaru decided that this would be enough for now. And so there was still one more important thing left to do. It was necessary to gather all the information about the convoy that would be transporting Libya. Hikaru decided that if the person from Fleur's Adventurer Guild knew a lot of secret information, then it would be possible to learn even more useful information from her. That was why Hikaru hurriedly went to the guild and talked to the admin girl. Although it was already too late, the Adventurers Guild was still open. Unexpectedly, Hikaru met his recent acquaintances 3 adventurer girls in the Adventurer Guild. Pia explained that they would like Hiraku to prove their words. Hikaru decided that he needed to confirm the information about the traitors. But it turned out that everything about the scum adventurers was quickly confirmed, and the girls want to clarify the questions about the adversaries. Hikaru realized that it would be necessary to tell all the events related to the goblins. Fleur explained that as an adventurer's guild, they were obligated to know everything, and so it would be good for Hikaru to tell everything in detail. Fleur also could not stand the test of jealousy and stated that apparently Hikaru, who had agreed to go to a cafe with her once, had now decided to do the same with other girls. Fleur then stated that she really needed to talk to Hikaru and had been waiting for such an opportunity for a long time. Hikaru accepted Fleur's offer, and they were once again at the cafe for dinner. The young adventurer asked why they were meeting again to talk at the cafe. Fleur explained that it was the best place to talk since the noodles here were very tasty. Hikaru didn't argue and decided to talk. But then Hikaru asked why these adventurous women were also in this place, since they had agreed to talk together. The most unpleasant surprise for Hikaru was that the company of girls was counting on a free dinner. The adventurer immediately said that he was not going to pay for all of them at once, but Fleur replied that there was no other way. Hikaru decided that if he thought about tomorrow, he shouldn't dine here now. And since he already had everything he needed, what to ask Fleur in that case was unclear. Hikaru asked the receptionist why she didn't close the guild when she left, but Fleur explained that Unken was still there, so everything would be fine. Fleur also said that they still have a submaster and another administrator who are currently on a business trip in the capital, and they should be back today. This information piqued the young adventurer's interest, but at that moment the owner of the cafe came to the table and greeted Fleur. The receptionist immediately introduced Hikaru, and the manager realized that he was the guy who had caught the red-horned rabbit. The manager then asked if he could buy this rabbit for good money. But Fleur immediately said that it couldn't be done that way, and the guild was interested in the matter. The manager laughed and said that he was more interested in the insides of the rabbit, and as far as he knew, they were usually just thrown away. The cafe manager asked that if it was possible, of course, to bring him the innards, and he would look at them and be well paid. The manager, calling Hikaru a baby, asked for such a favor. But the young adventurer asked if it was decent to call someone with whom you were negotiating a deal a kid. The manager noticed Hikaru's completely unchildlike look and apologized for his words, and then offered to pay for all of today's food on the house. Such generosity pleased Hikaru, because he really didn't want to pay for all of his companions. The manager continued to laugh and said that in return he wanted the young adventurer to still consider the possibility of a bargain. The offer of a free dinner really got Hikaru thinking, but the girls meanwhile were jubilant with joy and were already thinking about what to order. Priscilla said that Pia's greedy look gave her away too much. And Paula noticed that Priscilla herself was already drooling all over the table. Paula apologized for her behavior and that of her friends. But Hikaru asked the girl not to worry and not to call him Bayou, since he was the youngest at this table. Paula poorly understood the adventurer's request and called him Hikaru, but the boy explained that it was an incorrect address. The flustered healer then referred to herself as a night slave for Hikaru, and the guy simply asked the girl to be quiet. Fleur asked that was it really possible for Hikaru to absolutely escape from a huge number of goblins. Hikaru decided to tell the whole truth and claimed that he had only defeated their boss and the others had just scattered in panic. Hikaru explained that he was able to do all of this thanks to an instruction manual that, although old, was very helpful. Fleur praised the boy for his love of reading, but Hikaru explained that it wasn't just reading, but being able to survive in harsh conditions. Hikaru stated that it was generally stupid for just brothers to attack all the goblins at once, and Fleur confirmed it. Such words immediately made the team of adventure girls feel very ashamed, because that was exactly how stupid they had acted. Pia once again thanked Hikaru for their incredible rescue and asked how they could thank him. Priscilla, usually silent, exclaimed that they would give Hikaru their chastity. Paula immediately supported the idea and, judging by her appearance, was ready to do it right away. Fleur immediately intervened and stated that she was against it, because it would be very uncomfortable for Hikaru. The young adventurer explained that he didn't need to pay anything at all, and he just wanted to discuss some matters with Fleur, and that would be enough for everyone. Hikaru asked not to tell anyone about the incident in the forest, and the maximum that can be said is that he just saved them and nothing more. Fleur agreed, because they had already started questioning the arrested guys, and it would be illogical if it turned out that Hikaru had saved everyone. Fleur agreed to close this topic and not bring it up in the guild. Paula was horrified by this decision, for some of her vulgar dreams had been shattered. Hikaru explained that he still had some questions for Fleur, and the girl expressed her willingness to hear them. Hikaru inquired about the special escort squad and asked for clarification if it had already arrived in Pond. Hikaru realized from Fleur's reaction that she was obviously aware of something and said that as far as he understood, the people from the Adventurers Guild were also among the escorts. Hikaru asked if they were really the people who were supposed to return from a business trip from the capital. Fleur replied that Hikaru's intuition was too good, and the guy asked who exactly those adventurers involved in the escort were. Fleur, making a pensive face, gave herself even more importance, meanwhile stretching the moment of mystery. In the end, Fleur revealed that there was a team of 4 girls at the head of the escorts, and they were all B rank, and this night they should arrive. Hikaru noticed Pia's strange reaction and asked if B rank was really serious. Fleur stated that it really is, since it's almost the highest rank. Oh, and in fact, there is only one A-rank girl in the capital itself, and there are only 10 A-rank girls, including the above-mentioned girls. To Hikaru, the number of 6 seemed big enough to be called a rarity. But Fleur said that apparently Hikaru had never been to the city before, and if you compare it to Pond, there are 50 times fewer girls there. Then the young girl administrator said that this team of adventurous girls is called the 4 Eastern Stars, and they have a 100% completion rate. From the information received from Fleur, it was clear that Livia would be accompanied by adventurers of rank B. A team of 4 girls called the 4 Eastern Stars, and they are apparently very strong since there are only 10 of them in the capital. And this team of adventurer girls was supposed to arrive at the guild tonight. Hikaru decided to find out what kind of people they really were. Meanwhile, in the Adventurer Guild, Master Unken was chatting with the guests and expressed his distrust of the sub-master who had arrived, and looked suspiciously at the adventurers who had arrived. It turned out to be a team of male adventurers called the Distant Beautiful Star. The head of the team stated that he was a C-rank adventurer, and Unken was grateful that they had arrived. At this very moment, Hikaru applied life detection and marveled at what he saw. The young adventurer determined that there were 2 more administrators and a submaster beside Unken, and the other 3 were the adventurers who had come to escort, and they were clearly different from the girls Fleur had told him about. The head of the team was a Nagusa C-rank swordsman, and his skills did not allow him to detect Hikaru. The other 2 adventurers weren't strong enough to worry about them much. Hikaru was glad that for some unknown reason, the 4 Eastern Stars couldn't come to accompany him, but for now, it was still worth it to observe the guests. Unken asked how they were even going to do the escort job if there were only 3 of them. After all, normally there should be at least 4 people in this job. Nagisa proudly stated that they were C-rank adventurers and reminded them that it wasn't often that anyone was attacked at all on this road, and even if they were, they would easily repel any invasion. Nagisa exclaimed that his team was not made up of simpletons, and they were definitely stronger than the Eastern Stars, and so it was no problem that there were only 3 of them. Submaster asked Nagisa not to worry as their abilities were not being challenged, and said that a table had already been reserved for the entire team. An angry Unken asked that are they really going to drink before tomorrow's work. But the Submaster replied that there was nothing wrong with that, because they would only be leaving at lunchtime and would reach the capital by sunset, and so everything would be fine. Submaster Rogsa went to the diner with the adventurers to have a good celebration of the new mission. And Unken remained impressed by the strange guests. Unken admitted that it was all very suspicious, and he didn't understand what was going on with the capital's adventurer guild. The admin girl explained that the rank of adventurers was being raised because of the war and not because of people's abilities. Due to that, the task payment from the government also increases. Unken called it all a very bad practice, and at least Kensei would be the escort and maybe everything would go well. Unken asked the girl if she knew Rollins. The capital administrator explained that as far as she knew, he was the captain of the army of knights, but she had never heard of Kensei before. Hikaru, upon hearing this conversation, realized that they were discussing some strong person who would be in charge of escorting. But if that person was currently in the capital, it wouldn't be a problem. Unken, meanwhile, hoped for the successful completion of the task, and that was the end of their short dialogue with the girl. Hikaru was in high spirits, because as he thought luck had pleased him so far, because there were only 3 people in the escort. All that remained was to finish gathering the necessary information and prepare for the attack. It was for tomorrow that the daring rescue of Libya was scheduled. Near the Count's estate, 2 guards were waiting for the escort and discussing whether the beautiful girl Livia had really killed her father so ruthlessly. The boys agreed that there was no direct evidence of her guilt, but it just so happened that Livia was initially made guilty. The guards were not particularly worried about their task, for they were only ordered to obey the instructions of the capital's guests. One of the guards asked his colleague that was he really against the decision of his superior. But the fellow explained that it was not so at all, and he just did not understand a lot of things. Meanwhile, Livia was prepared for transportation and put on special magical handcuffs that could be removed in time. The chief alchemist explained that these handcuffs would hold until nightfall, but then their effects would wear off. The attentive guard thanked the alchemist and said that before sunset, they would already be in the capital. The alchemist went about his business, and the guard asked Livia to get ready to leave. The girl, without expressing any emotion, obeyed all orders and headed up the stairs. Suddenly, the guard felt a strange blowing of wind and thought he had imagined it. Livia saw the bright sun for the first time in a long time and felt the fresh air. It made her dizzy, and only thanks to the guard she did not fall. The guard explained to the captive that a carriage was waiting for her and she should hurry, and then marveled at the adventurers who were ready to accompany her. The commander of the guards was indignant, for he had been sent completely different adventurers from those promised. But Sub-Master Roggs convinced him otherwise and declared that very experienced and capable adventurers. The commander asked why no one was following the guild's orders at all, but Roggs explained that they were allowed to take these particular people as escorts and there was no problem. The commander exclaimed that he could not trust strangers, but Roggs continued to stand his ground and reminded him that it was time to leave for the capital. Nogus, noticing Livia, stated that she was pretty and would be a pleasure to accompany her. The commander of the guards noticed that the adventurer was drunk and declared that he could not perform his tasks in such a state. But Nogus did not admit guilt at all and only glared angrily at the commander. A real quarrel broke out between them, the purpose of which was to find out who was more in charge. In the meantime, Livia was already near the carriage, and it was only necessary to get into it. As soon as the girl was in the carriage, the commander of the guards said that they too should take up the cause. But the subordinates explained that this was foolish, because they had their own assignment and should not make independent decisions. Then the commander proposed to call the knights in the capital, but he was reminded that because of the shortage of people on such tasks and call adventurers, and therefore should just calm down and do not worry about someone else's mission. Meanwhile, Nagisa was looking at Livia with interest, trying to talk to her. The guards saw such unacceptable behavior, but at this moment the coachman reminded that they should already leave. One of the guards called the coachman aside and asked him to listen. The fellow explained that if the adventurers asked for the keys to the cage, he must not put the keys in their hands under any circumstances. Since the royal aristocrats were involved, and if anything happened to the girl, the coachman would be responsible. The agitated guard then sent the coachman to his carriage and ordered him not to spread the word about this conversation. The coachman quickly got the carriage moving, and it gradually began to move away. At this, the indignant commander of the guards cursed the vile adventurers several more times. Just at that moment, Captain Rawlison appeared and noticed that his subordinate commander was in a very bad mood. The guards were surprised by the captain's appearance, and Rawlinson explained that this case was very important, so he personally decided to find out the situation. The commander of the local guards asked the captain to allow him to accompany the carriage too, because he did not trust the adventurers who had arrived. But Rollins replied that it could not be done, and he would personally take care of everything. Rollins reiterated that this mission was a very responsible one, and therefore everyone must remain in their clearly marked places, and he as captain would not tolerate any objections. Rollins then asked the agitated commander to tell him all his concerns. In the meantime, the carriage was checked at the exit of the city and ascertained that the purpose of the trip to the capital was to conduct a court case. The documents were of course in order, and the carriage continued on its way. After a while, the coachman felt as if his horse was going much slower, but then everything normalized, and he decided that it was just his imagination. Once the carriage had traveled a sufficient distance from town, Nagisa demanded that the coachman give him the key to the carriage and threatened that he would not repeat it. But their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a man by the roadside who begged for some water. Nagisa, in spite of his northern character, stopped and decided to help. Giving his water flask to the stranger, the man who received the coveted liquid offered to take his belongings as a token of gratitude, but Nagisa replied that he did not need anything. The stranger asked the adventurer to give his name so that he might know the man who had saved him. Nagisa proudly introduced himself and declared that he would soon become a real hero. Nagisa sped up his horse to catch up with the wagon. but the stranger only smiled in the wake of the would-be hero. After a short distance, Nogisa decided that he was too bored and once again remembered the beautiful girl locked in the carriage. Nogisa asked the coachman to stop the carriage for a while, as everyone needed a little break. The daring adventurer then demanded that he be given the key to the carriage, and to convince him, he struck the coachman several times. Soon Nogis had the key, and the adventurer eagerly opened the carriage to enjoy the beautiful captive. But to his horror and surprise, Nogisa did not find the girl in the carriage, and in her place was only a rolled-up blanket.